the next thing that I noticed when I watched the tape is that apparently you guys, you have some people that are plowing class 6 roads or class 5 roads or whatever.
Class 5s, seasonal roads.
Seasonal roads, right. Well, I didn't know if maybe you were going after them because you're under the impression that nobody can do it other than the town or the road agent. And so I got this information, and private parties can maintain and repair class 6 roads, and all they need is permission from you guys, and you're under no obligation, or the road agent.
Yep.
And so rather than, I mean, if somebody wants to plow the road because, you know, they live on it or they have a seasonal camp or whatever, they're allowed to do that if they get permission from you guys to do that.
Right.
I didn't know if you were aware of that or not.
Yes.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case, though.
That was not the case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here.
Well, I'm going to leave you this
Yeah.
because this gives you an outline on some of the, by Susan Slack, who's an attorney, and you probably, some of you might remember her as the editor of the Granite State News. I don't know if she's still practicing or not. And then the final reason I was here is that I wanted to give Lloyd a chance to elaborate when he made the statement that Willand Road is too steep a grade to ever be reclassified as a Class 5 road. I wanted to know where you got that information.
I'll dig through my files and when I was on the budget committee, I remember the selectmen came in and mentioned 3 or 4 private roads that are not maintained by the town because of the grade.
Yeah.
But I'll dig through that.
Well, I've studied Class 6 roads quite a bit, and I have found no state regulations that say you cannot reclassify a road based on grade. And so when you're going to make definitive statements like that, that can lead to people taking action that can cost a lot of money. The only person that I ever heard say that was Dan Duffy to me when I was sitting across this table probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I didn't really want to, challenge him. But I think really that it should be stated unequivocally that there is, I doubt that any of you even know what the grade is on that section of road. Does anybody know what the grade is? Because I can tell you the grade.
I've driven through there.
Yeah.
I don't know what the grade is. I'm like you. I'm not aware of any restriction on reclassifying a
Right.
class
There is
6
no.
based upon.
And maybe the confusion came, I'm just gonna give everybody the benefit of the doubt here. There are local regulations, planning board regulations, about the grade of a newly constructed road.
Sure, absolutely.
Not a class 6 road or a class.
Exactly.
Right.
So
That's correct.
maybe that's where the confusion came.
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably what it is, but it really should be, it really needs to be clarified. I mean, I can't have people operating under the assumption that roads don't meet. You can, and this is leading into the next topic, and that is if you want to form a committee and you want to come up with a policy on Class 6 roads, that would probably be a fairly responsible thing to do. I have a bit of an apprehension about it because I really don't want to deny anybody the opportunities I've had. So I have here, just to back up my statement that you cannot not reclassify a road based on grade. I have the policy for the town of Allenstown. You guys can load this down. I'm not going to leave this with you. I'll leave you this other one. This is another little bit more detailed information regarding, also by Susan Slack, regarding the reclassification of a Class 6 road to a Class 5 road, and also some of the statutory notices that you can give out, also on building permits that you might want to review. But this is the policy for the town of Allenstown, and they've decided that they will not accept a Class 6 road to a Class 5 road if the grade is 12% or more, or they will accept it if it's 12% or less. Now, the grades, we do not have, as far as I know, any grade in this town that's greater than 11%. And the road that meets that 11% is, take a guess.
Going to Kena Valley.
That's it. Very good.
Thank you. I knew there was a spot.
Yeah. So Cane Valley has approximately a good 100 feet of road that's at 11%. Willand Road has two sections, approximately 20 feet that are 10%. And most of the grade is about 8%. And that goes for the Willand Road on the Camp Lawrence side, which the Willand Road on 171 side is in far, far better condition than the Camp Road.
It's the place in the middle that's the worst, between those two sections, as I remember.
Oh yeah, no, that's why I say you can put not a through road, because it's not a road, it's a path. It stops being a road at my house and it turns into a path. But you do have an awful lot. The unique thing about Willand Road is you have thousands of feet of lake frontage that is not accessible by a motored barge of any sort, because you have no public access.
Mhm.
So if you were to try to do anything drastic, I think you'd have a lot of really, I don't think it would be in the town's best interest to do.
Well, there are still summer cottages or.
There's several summer cottages, one's for sale for $340,000 and it has no, it's a shack that has no electricity. So you'd probably be hurting the town tax base somewhere. There's also some really good vistas up there as well. I do think it would be responsible to consider putting part of that road, and it doesn't have to include my house at all, but you do have 3 year-round residents on that road. You guys have issued building permits, they've all signed their release. I, of course, never signed any release because I moved on it 36 years ago, and I built the whole road, and I paved the apron, and it's not a problem, and it's no longer my house, it's in a trust. So, but I do think it would be a good idea to try to reclassify that to, if you want to mitigate the tax effect, to the same as Lang Pond, where it's seasonal, class 5 seasonal. That allows you to try to prevent any strip slums from developing, because really, once the rich guy at the top of the hill leaves and it's no longer plowable and not maintainable, that road's going to deteriorate. And what are you going to have then? Decreasing valuations. More people are going to want to come in and buy them because they're poor and they can afford it. And unless they get lucky and start making a lot more money, you're going to see the area constantly go lower and lower. This is one of the arguments for not allowing any development on Class 6 roads. But then again, you can have somebody like me that gets on there, gets lucky, and creates a benefit. So I'll let you guys decide. If you do decide to put a policy committee together, I hope you put me on that committee.
Well, I certainly can't be on it.
You can't be on it?
And, you know, I've, aside from owning a couple thousand feet of road frontage on a Class 6 road, I've always held the position that if you want to save the backland, if you want to save the open spaces, then let's get rid of the Class 6 roads. Because building on a town road is a hell of a lot less expensive than building a development. But it also, you know, controls your growth to the road frontage as opposed to having house lots everywhere. But I think a Class 6, no matter what we would want to do or what a committee would want to do, you still have to go before the town voters to declassify.
Reclassify requires a town vote. But
We did that 10 years ago on the section of County Road,
Yeah.
or there, give or take,
Yeah.
that there's now the seasonal section. Yeah.
yeah, I think if you point it out though, if it's, you know, I mean, it gets to be a pretty involved conversation, but I think if you're going to issue building permits, you really should probably have some sort of an idea of how you're going to transition. Sooner or later, you're going to have.
Well, once you have 3 houses up there, you've transitioned
Yeah, they're
Everything
gonna,
except for the road classification.
yeah, right, exactly, and if you're going to keep it in, you know, the intent was the roads were not used. There was nobody living on the roads, so why maintain them? And so now when you've got that cycle reverting, it's natural, you know. So that's it, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, have a good day.
Good job.
Let's go to signature file.
Thanks, Jim.
This is, this is paperwork concerning the April meter read. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, I am.
You want to speak on it briefly?
This was one of our power accounts that was clerically omitted when we went on the purchase power agreement back in October. So an addendum it was done to add this account, and for some reason it didn't get done in the January cycle. So
This is on the new power purchase agreement.
this is adding an account to the purchase power agreement. And we've signed the addendum to have it happen in January, and for some reason that didn't happen. So they're looking to re-sign it, would be effective April.
Okay.
And this is an account, if my memory serves, that we really don't use any power in. So it's not like we're spending a lot more money today that we could be saving. But nonetheless, it is one of the accounts.
Okay for me to initial where it says initial?
I'll make a motion that we approve the addendum.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
And I think that just requires your
Yep.
signature, right? and
Well, there's a lot of
initials.
initial spots.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just-
I don't think there's any signature, but just
It
initial.
just says initial.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Next is an applicant for lot 15-1-27. The applicant meets all the criteria. I recommend awarding a 500 standard veterans tax credit.
Move approval?
I'll second.
Oh, motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is current use land change. It's for map 59-1-23. Have you folks read this?
Yes.
Have you read it?
I don't believe I have, I'm sorry.
You want to look at it?
Thanks.
No problem. Is there a motion?
I will move approval.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Has to be in black ink.
2 signatures required?
Yeah.
The second. Is there a second?
Oh, I think you're right. I think there's another place where we need to sign.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
The last item is the letter of appreciation for a member who is resigned from Conservation Commission. Karen, have we received documentation that this person has resigned?
Yes.
And we made a motion, but we tabled it merely for the fact of waiting for your verification, right?
Yep.
Okay. This is to Nancy Bird. I read the letter into the record last meeting. Both she and her husband are moving and have done a lot for conservation on their lake.
All right.
Anything else to be signed? Next, Selectmen's updates. You gave one.
Yep. A couple other things. I attended last week the emergency management work session, and I apologize, I don't remember the acronym, but this is it was a tabletop exercise, if you will, or a walkthrough of setting up a point for mass screening or mass vaccinations. There are, in the county, there are 3 locations that have this capability. One is here in Tuftonboro, it's a gymnasium at the central school. One is in West Ossipee, and the third one is up in Jackson. And that's designed to cover all the populations in the communities of the town. There are pre-positioned trailers of equipment and such for each of those 3 locations. We keep one here in Tuftonboro, and the towns that are served by this southern location are Wakefield, Brookfield, Wolfboro, Tuftonboro. I think those are the 4 towns that are served by our location. Anyway, certainly a well thought out and structured approach to how you deal with the situation. I was impressed with the amount of thought and organization that's in there. As our emergency management director, Adam is the point person on all of this, and one of the things I did not have an appreciation for is to stand up and run one of these operations requires a large number of volunteers. When I talked with Adam and with the county emergency management director about it, they did identify that yes, having volunteers and having qualified volunteers is always an issue. So I'll just put it out there, anybody that has an interest in stepping up to provide assistance in these situations, I would encourage you to make yourself known to Adam as it relates to what gets done in these mass screening evolutions. A lot of it is helping get people formed up for the entrance, checking people in on lists, helping them walk through what it is that they need to, where the next station is that they go. So a lot of the volunteers, I got the idea, you don't have to be have a high level of training relative to public health issues or those sorts of things. It's just hands that are available and understand the basic how things go to make it happen. So anybody that's interested and willing to step up, and this is not something that happens on a regular basis. It would be something similar to the kind of evolution that we might do in the event of a bad storm. Although the focus of this particular type of thing has to do more with public health than with storm sheltering and that sort of thing. But
Yeah, I remember when I was at the county that there was a pandemic of some flu virus, and we put in extra phone lines, set up a system so that the dispatch could expand to handle that theoretically, but it was in the delegation room. So there's quite a system in place there, but not to handle people, more to handle the coordination.
Right. Planning board is meeting this Thursday night. It was a rescheduled from our regular first Thursday meeting. My understanding is that there is a site application coming to the planning board. I haven't seen an agenda yet, and I will be out of town this week, so I won't be there. But anyway, another initiative that planning board is working on is getting the state gravel tax guru, Mary Pinkham Langer, to come back and meet with residents in Putnam Borough. We have a handful of people that are that have pits, gravel pits, that are kind of in a largesse period before they have to come into full compliance with the state regulations. This is in accordance with the revised zoning ordinance that was passed last year. So a year from now, anybody that has been operating a gravel pit that doesn't have an approved site plan is going to have to come forward with a site plan, get it approved by the planning board, and go forward from there. Now the rub with that is there's significant costs associated with putting that together because of the surveying that has to be done, the remediation plan that has to be put together. So some of these small pits that have been around forever and used somewhat casually, the question is, what happens going forward? Is someone going to kind of put significant resources into having them be legal or not? So we're trying to arrange a meeting for her to come back and sit with folks and explore this whole issue. So that's all I have.
Well, it's sugar season, so I'm boiling maple syrup. Just making sugar from trees. But that did give me an opportunity to look at that request for abatement by the co-op. And it raised more questions than it certainly answered for me. Currently, they're at $10 million assessed value. Their book value after depreciation is $7 million, but I guess that's not good enough. So DRA has come up with a value of $4 million. If you run the math out, the $10 million assessed value pretty much comports with the cost of constructing a mile or 165 miles of power line. I mean, I knew from experience that that number divided into the 165 miles works out to about $66,000 a mile, which is a little less than it actually would cost the average developer to put in a mile of power. So the number's not that far off actual cash value for construction. They were nice enough to send their revenue figures along. I think they're limited revenue figures, because I think there's some other revenue involved. But it works out to, if you just divide it up by the number of members taking power from Toftonboro, about $1,220 per member in electric costs, which is about $100 a month, which seems about right. And the actual amount of tax paid on that is $34 per resident, or somewhere under 3%. I mean, none of the numbers seem to spring out at me and think, Jesus, we're really killing the co-op, because they just open their letter up by talking about how they're member-owned and a non-profit, et cetera, et cetera. But I was at the end of it, when I was almost burning this syrup I was boiling, I was trying to figure out what the actual tax implication would be, because I'm certain that they're not going to give everybody a $34 break on their power, because that's what the taxes that they're currently paying. So if they reduce the tax to $5, so they're going to get the balance back to their customers, because they're taking $10 million off of our tax rolls at that point, or not. If they go down to 4, they're taking $6 million off our tax roll. That's going to increase everybody else's property taxes.
Right.
So it isn't a net gain by just not taxing the power company. And we passed this off to a law firm, is that how we handle it?
Yes.
Yeah.
You want to talk to Chris Sansucci.
Okay.
He is the
George Sansucci.
George Sansucci.
Yeah.
He also just got elected selectman in Sandwich. I've worked on a couple of mediation.
You're talking about Chris Bolt, who's our
Chris
attorney.
Bolt, excuse me.
Okay, yeah.
George Sansucci is the appraiser.
Chris Bolt is the guru
Yeah.
on that,
And I don't see that there's been any resolution from the court cases.
the court case.
Every one of the cases that's been done has always been done in the favor of the towns,
Yeah.
Yes.
and not in the favor of the utilities.
And there's appeal after appeal.
And my read on this is that, of course, every town does their assessing individually, which is the system that's set up in this state. So the way the assessment is done in towns is not consistent across all towns. And there, I believe, are some taxing jurisdictions that have some significant impacts on the taxes that the utilities pay, particularly, not necessarily the co-op, but the Eversource and so it seems to me it's become just a matter of course every year now, because there's been ongoing litigation and challenges and appeals for a number of years, that every year the utilities, until something is finally decided, we're going to file again against all the towns. As you say, with the co-op, the difference between where we're at and where they're at in the grand scheme of things is not huge.
Well, if you could determine where they're at, if they want to go to DRA, it is a pretty big
Right.
leap.
The DRA assessment model is very simplistic, and it probably takes about a 30-second calculation, and this is what it is. Time and again, as I recall, in the appeals and the court decisions, the more robust models that have been used to determine valuation have been identified in the decisions as being appropriate. But philosophically, I guess the question is, and we all get, those of us that get our power from the co-op, which is almost everybody in Tuftonboro, every once in a while you'll see in the newsletter an appeal to the customers to
Band
to
together.
support lower assessed valuations on the utilities by the towns. It's a question is where, philosophically, where does the cost get borne? Does the person that benefits from the commodity that's supplied pay for it, or does the landowner in the towns that the utilities go through pay for it? Because as the assessed valuation goes down, the taxes collected by the town
Well, they remain
from the utility
static.
go down,
Sure.
so the taxes that everybody else pays go up. So as a landowner in the town of Tuftonboro, if the utilities pay less taxes, then I will pay more taxes to make up for that difference. And in theory, that reduced cost to them may reduce their rate, may reduce the cost that I pay to utility. However, the benefit that's accrued is accrued to the individual that uses the power. So if I use more power, then I accrue more of a savings if the tax is lower. If I don't use any power, it makes no difference to me. So it just, like with so many things, the cost of doing business
Well, if
ought to
you-
be borne by the individual that benefits
If
from
you
it.
don't use any power, it does affect you, because if the power, if the taxes go down on the utility, your taxes go
No,
up.
I'm saying as a ratepayer, as a user of the commodity, if I don't use any power at all, then the cost of, the cost associated with the power I don't affect any savings. But as a taxpayer in the town, my tax is gonna go up if what the utility pays goes down. I mean, there's a real benefit to the utility to having the poles and their infrastructure in the town.
Yeah, and when I was doing the math, I was just doing customers, miles of road, or miles of line. That's it. I didn't take into account the transition lines or transmission lines.
Transmission lines, yeah,
which
substations
are
and, yeah.
feeding somewhere else. They're not feeding Tuftonboro per se very much. So, I mean, that's got a value to the co-op, but at any rate, that's,
Another person to is Bill Stockland. He became aware of the inequity when the lines, transmission lines were doubled from Transformer Hill to Ossipee, and it wasn't reflected on any
assessment,
the
right.
and the utilities in this town 2 years ago we assessed them at about $14 million.
And they're down to